Okay, so we can get started. Make sure your water is nice and clean. Wet your paintbrush and wet your paper. This is nothing new. And at this point, you must be feeling pretty confident now in your skills, and you've probably warmed up enough where a lot of these are going to be a lot easier for you than when you first began, which is great. We're going to take a little bit of the blue. I didn't take a lot of it, so I'm okay with just kind of taking this straight into the painting right away. I'm not even drying my brush. I'm just going to pull it across all the way down. But after I do that, now I'm going to kind of pat my brush dry and try to even out some of these lines while they're still wet. If they are not completely even, I don't think it really matters so much, because it sort of does emulate the look of clouds, and you would see clouds in water, right? Even if it was a still like stream like we're kind of creating today. So the next part we are going to be using orange and our brown, which, as you know, at this moment in time, it's just a mixture of our complementary colors. The blue with the orange will create this nice neutral brown. I'm going to be using a round brush, so we're going to get more natural lines going across instead of anything that is a little bit too harsh. And what I'm going to do is take just some of this orange and put it directly into that blue. We're not going to need that blue anymore. I'm going to wet it up, and we're going to create this piece by kind of carving areas out that are going to be the land that's kind of jutting through this. And I think how I began originally was starting with this one directly in the center of the image going horizontal. So I kind of found the middle point right here and then worked my way back this way and then diagonal down. Kind of let your paintbrush play a little bit as they kind of go up. You can create these little hills by doing that. And I'm even kind of just going in like this and bringing it down. Fill it in with these kind of long lines, especially right where the water meets the land, where it would appear a little bit darker because it's very moist there. And I will let that dry for now. I want to start thinking about the shape of the S that we're creating. So it might be best to kind of bring in that one on top of it. This way we can really start shaping it. So what I'm going to do is just, you can tell before I even put my paintbrush down, I'm just kind of figuring out where it's going to go. And I'm going to start kind of across from where we put that paintbrush down, about here. And I'm going to bring it up and around, just sort of mimicking the line that we had below it. And I think I'm just going to stop right there for now. It's very dark and I don't need it to be that dark for everything. But I am going to kind of just start creating this shape about here. I think is a good point for us to kind of meet. Kind of wrap this around. Down here, it can really kind of, you can make your lines a little bit angled up if you would like. And I think what I'll do is just try to get that line in first. And then from here, if I want, I can kind of bring some more curves up and over here. And these are nice too, because it really is starting to lead the viewer's eye into it. You're kind of dropping in. And I'm going to try to make these a little bit more horizontal at the top. I do think that this is rounded a little bit too much, where it wouldn't make that much sense. There has to be a slightly more horizontal, so it does appear as though it is on, like on the land, if that makes sense. So I'm going to start shaping up some of these lines that are not working for me. While we're here, I think what I'll do is kind of take this color that we already have and start adding in my first little hill. And it really does cut across and dips down here on the right. So do this how you would like. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine. You do it the way you want to. And yeah, we're just gonna go for it. I kind of just met mine into the thing I was already working on below. I do like in this piece, I had kind of like one little area jutting out. That makes sense. I am gonna kind of put in that first mountain, or I'm sorry, hill right here. I'm not sure if I've ever actually said this out loud, but if you have a transparent layer like this one, like for instance, it's more transparent than the one above it, I'm still gonna let this layer dry, because if I apply a second transparent layer over it, it will darken automatically. So it's almost like layering cellophane. If you have a clear, a red sheet of cellophane and then you cut a strip and you lay it on top, the area where the two are overlapping will be more dark. So you can kind of play with that with your watercolor pieces, your gouache pieces, and even acrylic and oil. To be honest, if you're using transparent layers, have some fun with figuring out how transparency overlaps and how they blend with each other. And the colors that are below it interact with the colors above it. One thing I do like with the study are shadows, right? We have an area here that does look like there's a cloud, like maybe over here off the camera, that is casting a shadow down. Or perhaps a lot of this is from the tree, which I don't really think so, but these are things that you can really play with. And I think it does add a lot to your narrative, where you're giving your audience information that doesn't exist necessarily on the piece, but exists in the world that you are creating. So I am going to kind of figure out where that shadow area is going to be, where I'm going to put my tree later, and just start bringing these shadows into each other a little bit more. And here, I think I really like how some of these lines were going up like that. Really does create a separation between the two layers, even though they are the same color. And I think I'm just going to start pulling a few of these transparencies together with the original one to get some texture into the ground. This area right here, I do want it to appear as though it is going into the water, where perhaps you can see through the water a little bit to that bank and see some of that ground underneath before it dips off underneath the water. Maybe here as well. And I'm not going to do that here because, as I said before, this really is supposed to mimic the foreground. And I think I'm okay at the moment to kind of leave this until the very end. If I want to fill in a few transparencies at the moment, I can do that, but it's not really necessary. I think at this moment in time, I really need to focus on that final mountain, hill. And what I'm going to do is kind of create a transparent layer of brown by taking my orange, some blue, and I'm going to add water to it to make it more of a wash. And then I will go in later to add details to it. And right around the center line, that vertical line down is, I think, where I'm going to begin this mountain in the background. Hill. I keep saying mountain, but I'm not creating the shape of that hill yet. I'm gonna kind of just try to bring in some of the darkest right here. Wet my paintbrush so I can dilute the mixture a little bit. And I think now is when I'm going to make that hump on the top here. Okay. While I have this color, I'm going to just go in and add a couple of these diagonal lines up to make it appear as though there is a little bit of a shadow on that mountain in the background. Hill. Keep doing that. And then I really liked how this hill was kind of in shadow. As we mentioned before, it could be because there's a cloud off the page possibly. So I really wanted to add that one back in. And I'm going to wet this up a little bit and possibly start working on that hill that is still in between this one and this one. Now it's kind of fun. This is the part where you can kind of just fill some things in and look at your piece from afar and see what's working, what's not working, and where you can start adding more information. I think what I'm going to do is add some dark values in the foreground here. Try to make some of these lines appear as though they're starting to creep up this hill. And I may even want to go a little bit darker. Darken the shadow right here. That kind of comes off the edge a little bit. It's a little bit too dark, so I'm going to try to fade it by drying my brush first and kind of bringing this up. This area in particular looks a little bit strange to me. It sort of appears as though there is like a slight hill here and it's dropping off, but it doesn't quite extend long enough for it to make sense to me personally. Or perhaps it's that if it did extend like this, you would probably see a little bit of the shadow in the water behind it, like that. So I'm gonna kind of play with that a little bit. And see if I could come up with something that I like a little bit more, hopefully. Might be a little bit too dark. All right, I'm going to start bringing some of my oranges, my pure pigment oranges in and really water it down. Right at this moment, I think the lines are just way, way too harsh. So if I can start softening things, that would be fantastic. So I'm really just going to kind of add in this orange wash to start blending some of these things together a little bit better. I really didn't want this piece to be too high contrast, and it definitely is appearing so at the moment. But hey, that is okay too. Sometimes these things take shape even just with like the mood that you're in for the day. And sometimes you go with it. We started off with the Eyvind Earle one, or at least I did for tonight, so I'm definitely in that more stylistic zone at the moment. And sometimes the things that you're working on prior to your piece will affect how you paint. I'm gonna let this dry a little bit and then do one more transparent layer over here. And I'm gonna see if I can start shaping this hill a little bit better. And at this point in time, you've probably done enough of these where you're starting to see in your own work where you would like to make some changes, where you would like to soften things, or maybe, you know, blend them a little bit better. I think that's dry enough. We're going to add my final transparent layer of orangey brown. I'm just going to kind of swirl these together and see what color I get, and just start adding it directly in here. I'm keeping it very loose. I'm going to see how that dries. I'm hoping that'll create a nice effect. Sometimes you leave it up to fate and it's exactly what you want, or it's not. But I think I'm feeling like I might get lucky with this one. All right. You can start figuring out for yourself if you want to add similar trees like I have, or if you just want to wing it and do it on your own. So that is completely and entirely up to you. I'm going to start light and then go darker. So I think what that means for me is I'm going to take some orange with a tiny dab of blue just to mute the orange a little bit. I'm going to water it down a little bit and just start adding in these little things where I feel like it. For the tree here, I'm not going to use too much orange because it is very distinct. But back here, it did make sense to have some things here where you're not really seeing exactly what it is, but it mimics trees, foliage, or maybe even a barn in there. I don't know. Maybe even some things up here on the hill. And I'll start adding in where that tree is going to be in the shadow, so I know where that is. Or I might even add something right here and try to get a little bit of a reflection in that water. I'm adding a lot of blue now. In fact, I'm going to try to keep it pretty even with my blue and my orange, because blue is darker, so will definitely make everything more brown. I'm going to want to switch my paintbrushes probably to a smaller round brush. So I'm going to use my number 2 round brush to start adding in some of these finer details now. Figure out where that tree is going to be. All right, so one thing that I am loving about this one, that I don't like about this one, is that tree is popping into view of the river, and it really does make it pop. You're getting that contrast. I don't have that here. So I think I might just see if I can actually blend this a little bit better, kind of blend out that tree into the background. And I'm gonna move my tree now here because I would love for it to kind of pop up the way it did there. I think that's a better placement for this one. Although it's super wet now, so I'm gonna have to come back to do the trunk of the tree. Although it's starting to appear like a tree trunk is starting to emerge anyhow. And I'll go up here and start darkening this one. At this stage of the painting process, it's really now fine-tuning. So you're gonna have to go around and figure out what is working for you and what is not working for you. That's gonna be a journey that you have to go on by yourself. So if you want to continue watching, you can, or this might be a good time for you to just turn it off and focus on your own piece. I'm actually trying to take some tricks from Eyvind Earle and pulling these lines further across. I really like the way that looks. And if you are still here, I'm going to finish it off now by going a little heavy on my pigment. Less water, more pigment, and then try to add in some of the details in the trees that I really want to pop out a little bit. And I'm going to start with this one. Still very wet. Try to add some shadows under the trees. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually think I'm starting to like the one I'm working on now better. I don't know. I'm still having issues with that river, I think, but if I took this one away, yeah, I'm still having issues with that river, and that's okay. Not all of them have to be perfect. Yeah, all right, I think I'm gonna end it there, and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, take care.